probably 10 years ago, a therapist kind of teach me what dissociation is, like how dissociated I was. And then it was like, stop doing that. Okay. Like, stop doing that. I'll stop doing that. I'll stop doing this thing that I've been doing for 3 decades now. I was like burning all this energy trying to stop doing it, using meditation and yoga and the practices to like, okay, be in the present moment, stop dissociating. And meanwhile, this part of me is like, what do you mean stop? This is what kept you alive. When those things kind of clicked in my head, like, oh, why am I spending all this time? Like, why don't I shift to what I want to do instead? So it's like, I want to give this dissociation a new job. I want to give my brain a new job to do. We are toddlers in taller bodies. And what do you do when you want a toddler to stop doing something? Do you sit there and tell them to stop? Or do you redirect them to something else?
We'll make it out and fall in love tonight.
On today's episode, we are thrilled to welcome Melissa Romano. Melissa is a dedicated healer and the founder of Reclaiming Healthy. With a profound personal journey through trauma and self-discovery, she transforms her life and now helps others do the same. She passionately creates safe spaces for healing, guiding her clients to reconnect with their bodies and find true wellness. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. That was a wonderful description.
We are so glad you are here today. I think one of the things, and I'll just start off with finding your content on social media, seeing you come across, and you've been popping up on these spaces, and the tips that you give and the way that you can connect with the body so quickly on these reels is just amazing. You had one that made me just crack up so hard. And I'm like, oh, look at that. So I was really excited to reach out. Have you seen where they'll do like these cognitive tests or like not cognitive, but like where you're like connecting, can you move your fingers the same, and I keep like just failing those. I think I'm doing it. And then they just drop. And you had one where you were like, can you touch your finger? And how about all of them? And I'm going through following along and I'm like, I am nailing this one. I've got this. We are starting to align. Their neurons are connecting. And then you're like, good job getting in your body. Clever. I loved it. And I'm like, okay, that's an interesting point where it's just simple of tapping on different spots, trying to sporadically do it to help get yourself in your body. And I loved it. It was so simple and it was so funny. I'm like, do you know what she did?
Yeah, people love it when they think it's a good challenge that they might fail, they're going to do it. But if I said, let's do something to get back into your body, they'd be like, next.
I love it. Yeah. So how is your journey to the somatic body? What led you to that connection?
It's kind of funny. I always say everything that I did to try to help or heal myself, I then would learn and then be like, I have to tell everybody else. Like I need to tell everyone else now. And my journey actually started with the body, but in the more traditional fitness way. So when I was in my early 20s, I was just no longer an athlete or anything like that. I did not treat myself very well. I was in college and food was not even, I didn't even care. It was more, partying and I felt it in my physical body. So I was in a lot of pain, a lot of back pain. I went through all of these specialists and everything that they offered seemed very dramatic. So I'm like, I am a researcher by nature. By my first bachelor's degree is in history. So it's like, I just want to learn. So I went to try to figure out what I could do to help with the pain. So I started working out. I got really into fitness. I got into that component of corrective exercise. So then I did personal training and corrective exercise. And I did that for about 6 years working in gyms. And I remember people being like, how do you have this high retention rate? Like, how are clients staying with you forever? I'm like, I don't know. So I realized it was so much more than coming in and working out. We were talking and we were getting deep in there. And I'm like, okay, well, I want to learn how to do that. So I went through all of this yoga training and specifically yoga therapy, yoga psychology. And that's where it just really grabbed me. And I'm like, okay, there is this concept of like Western psychology and Eastern body. So it's like Eastern body, Western mind, and putting it together. And once I started learning about the nervous system specifically and trying it on myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, this was the missing component. This is what I needed the whole time. So, I started practicing it myself. And then, like I said, I'll go and seek out these certifications or education or master's program and then be like, okay, now I have to tell everybody else. So definitely being able to tap into something that was already inside of me, as opposed to that pursuit of like, who's the next person that's going to teach me or the next thing that's going to fix me or the next, tapping into something that was already inside of me was like mind blowing.
I can relate so much. I think that it's one of those things where we've been on this path of healing for a really, really long time. And it was the same thing where it was like always looking for the answers, always looking for who the book or the podcast or the information or the tip or the trick or the technique or the therapist or all of these different things. And then it's funny too, because we went through yoga training a couple of years back, and that was a significant shift for both of us. But for me specifically, because it was the first time that I had active awareness, meaning like real cognitive awareness of how unsafe it felt to be in my body and how much I avoided being in my body. It was literally like this huge epiphany where I always thought that I was connected to my body. I've been very athletic over the years and done all sorts of different things that I would, be able to articulate and say, oh yeah, I'm connected and I feel my body and I know what my body's doing. And then yoga just went like behind the curtain and said, what about all this other stuff in your body? And I'm like, I don't know what any of that shit is. It was a nightmare to slow down. Like I had the hardest time to just doing simple yoga poses because it was bringing up so much stuff for me to feel.
Yeah, yoga is not, I feel like yoga training is not training for yoga. It is like this great self study. I feel like
Right.
everyone should do it. And yeah, it's something that is like, one of my clients a couple years ago had a sweatshirt made for me that said normal does not equal healthy. And that was kind of the thing that once I started learning all of this, what was normal to me, what felt normal to me was not natural. And it certainly was not healthy. But it was one of those things where it's like, if you just have always lived that way and felt that way, it just seems normal. It's not, it doesn't even necessarily feel like anything's wrong. And I lived on edge and without even knowing it, because again, it was like, I'd been there since I was a small child. So, listening to the sound of the door, like how hard or soft it closed, or people's footsteps, or, paying attention to the micro changes in someone's face. It's like, I want to hear people say like, oh, I'm just an empath. That's like, or are you traumatized? They're like, I think we all have empathic capabilities, but it's like that, like paying attention to all the little things, or like noticing those subtle shifts. It's like, that is not, it was not healthy for me.
We can relate to that one too.
So much. You talked about one of that, just to bring, is it empathic or are you traumatized? And that's such a good awareness on that to look at. And it's not about diving into, now I have to really identify and pull all these things and labels or know exactly each thing. But so much of that, like just having that little bit of awareness comes through. Maybe you're waking up at night with anxiety. Maybe you're waking up in the morning and you're like, oh, like feeling this fear. It comes up when you're least expect it. I mean, there's times when you're in an anxious moment and it clicks and it makes sense. You're like, it's running late. There's, incredible traffic, or it's crappy weather driving, just for a road example. But there's times you're just fine. You're sleeping and all of a sudden, boom, here comes up this thing to where you're thinking all these things are happening, or you're watching the way your partner's sleeping. Is there something you wake up and hear the coffee pot and you think, it's just the way it sounds. So much of that comes through where you're in a restful place and now you're very afraid, very aware, very hypervigilant in that space.
Yeah, and we spend so much time on the why. Why am I like this? Why is this happening? Why? And it's like, doesn't really matter. Like, you know, sometimes we can connect those dots, but we've made that like the most important component. And I just feel like we burn up a lot of time there. It's like, well, yeah, why? Why am I like this? Why am I like this? It's like, I take a look around. Like, look at the culture we live in. Look at the, you know, our entire human experience. So it's like there are so many reasons why. Let's go from where we are. How does it feel?
That's such a tough question too, right? I think that anytime people, rather than, okay, I'm going to do the best that I can to speak about my own lived experience. So many times I speak about stuff from this perspective of like the external and putting it out on society and people and this, that, and the other. But when I'm really in the activation state of whatever's going on, right? When my nervous system is not regulated, when it's dysregulated, whether it's up or down, I'm constantly disconnected from what I'm feeling. And I remember there was a stage of like healing that we got to, and I say we because a lot of our path is kind of mirroring one another. It seems like we're just constantly in this beautiful ebb and flow going back and forth. And there came a point where I couldn't intellectually understand or process things any longer because it was just like a feedback loop. No matter how many times I would dissect it and understand it and connect it to something from childhood or some trauma, or, okay, now I understand why I'm behaving this way, or I can understand, you know, how come I'm reacting to this external stimulus this certain way. And all of those things I started to really understand and put pieces together finally, which was really relieving on one hand, and it brought me a lot of peace. But it also was just like phase one of the process, because no matter how many times I tried to understand something about what I was feeling, it still like did not fix it. It really only came down to, okay, now you have to feel the thing that you're feeling, and feel not even the thing. Like, this is what I think so much, Melissa, is where it's not, how can I identify the problem or the situation or the trigger. Now I have to feel in relation to that trigger. And I'm like, cool, check the box, did my feeling, and then I'll move on from the day, as opposed to just doing the best that I can to constantly be in a state of feeling, whatever it might be, hot, cold, tired, angry, sad, happy, just feeling the waves of life themselves. And that's kind of where I'm at this phase, where it's less about how can I'm still connecting all these dots all the time. Like, I don't know if I'm going to, that part seems really crucial for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like phase two for me is really getting into the body and slowing down and learning how to just allow myself to feel what it is that I'm feeling. How do you help people with that process? Because I think there's such a huge disconnect from, like you were saying earlier, we've got Western psychology,
Mm-hmm.
Eastern medicine, we've got all of these things that don't seemingly fit with each other. But then when you can combine them together, there's some really powerful stuff that can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say it's not easy, but it's simple.
I like that.
It's not easy conceptually, right? Because like you said, we want to intellectualize everything. Like I was a get by girl. Like I barely got by. But I always made it. Like I went to undergrad and like I barely got out of there, but I did. Nobody knows what my grades were. I had the degree. But I thought I was stupid. I mean, I really thought like I'm not a good student. I am not that smart. And it turns out I was just dysregulated. And once I started getting more connected and more regulated, I realized I was actually quite smart, just in enough time to also realize that intellectualizing is not the appropriate vehicle for healing. So it's like, yes, absolutely. I want to connect the dots. I do want to know and understand generationally, the things that happened to my family. And I realize that it is actually quite simple. It's like these moments of stringing together enough of the practices where they're not profound in the moment. Like every time I would walk into a room, I would look around the room. I would notice using my senses what I could see, what I could hear, what I could smell, what I could touch, what I could taste every time I walked into a new room. Now, on its own, that does not seem profound. There's no like immense breakthrough every time I do it. However, I string together enough experiences like that. And before you know it, I am a completely different person. So being, and what I mean by that is a completely different person in the way that I have now trained my brain to look for signs of safety, as opposed to train my brain that was already trained to look for signs of danger.
Okay,
That just, yeah, you too.
hold on.
Woo.
Say it one more time and then go into it, because I want to make sure that I'm going to study. So speak more, please.
So I slowly trained my brain to look for signs of safety, right? I was coming back to the present moment, but it's this magical way of noticing, right? Like right now in my room before we got on this call, I'm like, I notice my dream catcher. I notice I call it my depression lamp. One of the lights, right? The picture of my son. I have some lavender over here. And when I notice the things, especially the things in my space that, make me feel like unhappy, I'm like, oh, okay. And I can hear, the car outside, and I can hear the dog walking through so I'm training my brain, look at this time and space, right? So I'm connecting to myself through my senses. I'm connecting to this time and space, right? So not just the present moment, but literally my space. And then I'm connecting to anything else that's around me, right? Because I am paying attention. So I've trained my brain slowly to look for signs of safety. So I've given it a new job.
I freaking love that.
Instead of saying, stop doing that, right? No, I gave it a new job. So it's like, I call it the tipping point. This kind of work is rarely that big breakthrough, right? You're not going to walk into a session and be like, you will have those, I've connected the dots, or, oh my gosh, like us having this conversation right now, you're like, oh, okay. You'll have those moments, but it's not, like I said, this profound experience where I walk in a room and do that. And I'm like, I'm completely changed. It's that I do that every time I walk into a new space, every time I go to get in my car, every time I go to get out of my car. It's simple. And then I'm like, a couple of weeks later, I'm like, something happens and I respond completely differently. And I'm like, who is that girl? Oh my God, I like her. It's like I have slowly created this system of self-regulation. So the how is through connection.
I thought I had that. I've been practicing, like, I thought I had it. Would look, and what I was doing was looking for threats and telling myself, see, there's nothing scary. There's nothing scary. I have techniques to make sure there's no threats. And after no threats assessed, okay, safe. I'm in a safe space. I never had that switch, that like point of view to look for signs of safety. Look, here's safe, here's safe. I'm still assessing threats. And when no threats are there, then it's like, okay, I'm safe. I'm nailing it. I walked into the room and I see that I am safe. I've got it. I was missing a key component. It's still expecting a threat when you walk into a space.
Mm-hmm.
That is such, as you call it, tipping point. I love that. That was such a moment to like, oh, I wonder what that will feel like to look for safety as opposed to looking for the threat. I'm just like, I'm tongue tied. I was like, whoa.
No, I had that. We spend so much, it's like that why we spend so much time on the why. We spend so much time on how do I stop doing this? And that's what I always say, like the framework that I created was because I realized how exhausting it is to stay in that loop of like, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this? How do I make it stop? How do I stop doing this? And it's like, well, just, I had probably 10 years ago, a therapist kind of teach me what dissociation is, like how dissociated I was. And then it was like, stop doing that. Okay. Like, stop doing that. I'll stop doing that. I'll stop doing this thing that I've been doing for 3 decades now. So I was like burning all this energy trying to stop doing it. Like, using meditation and yoga and the practices to like, okay, be in the present moment, stop dissociating. And meanwhile, this part of me is like, what do you mean stop? This is what kept you alive. Like, what do you mean stop? So that when those things kind of clicked in my head, like, oh, why am I spending all this time? Like, why don't I shift to what I want to do instead? So it's like, I want to give this dissociation a new job. I want to give my brain a new job to do. Like, here's what to do instead. It's like we are toddlers in taller bodies. And what do you do when you want a toddler to stop doing something? Do you sit there and tell them to stop? Or do you redirect them to something else?
The awareness that, like Steph was saying, scanning for threat first, and then reminding myself, oh, I'm calm, I'm safe, everything's okay, it's a beautiful day, I'm feeling great. And then there's still that part of my brain that will, like, I go back and forth because more and more it's everything's okay, I'm safe, I don't have a reason. It's not necessarily saying I don't have a reason to be activated in this moment, but it's acknowledging that the activation occurred and everything's okay, and then just learning how to regulate and come back down. But I freaking love that idea of not just giving your brain another thing to do, but instead of the thing that it was doing subconsciously, like you said, for 30 years, right? Ours is like 40 plus years of unconscious scanning for threat assessment, giving it that opportunity to look for safety, to look for the things in your life that are actually going well and that are feeling good and that are safe about it. I love it. I want to ask you, because we talk a lot about how it's really difficult to go through the path of like healing, or to start thinking about your life from the perspective of like, okay, I'm going to actively start working on myself and shifting and changing things when I'm still in that activated kind of chaotic space, right? And what was the question? Go ahead.
I think you're going towards like it's hard to heal and where you're hurt and where you're scared. And so when you're in that activation, how are you making those changes?
Yeah, right. It's like, how do we help people understand that? Because everybody's like, I want to stop, I want to change. How can I change this thing? And for us, what we've realized over the years was real change didn't actually start taking place until we had awareness even that we were in activation the majority of the time, that life was still crazy and chaotic and stressful. And in those moments, it's like, it's triage, right? It's just dealing with whatever is coming up in front of you first and foremost, taking a deep breath and going to the next thing and to the next thing and to the next thing. It's never the opportunity to actually pause and reflect. So how do we help people with that, Melissa?
I think the main thing is we have to do it when we're not struggling too. So when my son was 2, I started in every room of the house. I had a piece of paper on all of like in all of the doorways that had 4 faces: happy, mad, sad, scared. I knew he was 2, so that's about the extent of it. Which most adults that I meet, that's about the extent of their vocabulary too. But every time, well, again, every time we walked into a new room, or we would just be sitting there, I didn't wait until he was visibly scared, though I would do it then too, right? I didn't wait until he was actively mad. Every now and then I would just be like, how are you feeling? And, and he would point to one, maybe 2 of them, and some of them opposing ones. And I'd be like, okay, cool. It's this little getting to know you, this taking the pauses to check in. The problem is we want to read about these skills, we want to learn these skills, and then we're like, okay, when I need them, I'm going to call upon them. And it's the equivalent. I always say it's like if you came to me and said, how do I run a marathon? And I gave you all of these tips and you wrote them all down, and then you waited until race day to implement them. How's that going to go? Well, and then for us, we're also saying, and I want to stop doing this, this, and this. I want to take away my favorite coping skill. So it's like, okay, step up to that race and give me your running shoes and your favorite sports bra and your hair tie. Go. It's going to go horribly, right? So if we're like, I'm going to wait until I know that I'm dysregulated, I'm going to wait till I'm really, really anxious, or until I'm so shut down that I can't get out of bed, and then I'm going to practice these things. That's how it's going to feel. So we want to build them in almost as a way of living, not things to check off a box. So where can you implement them into your day to just ask yourself, like, just check in. What do I notice? That's all. Not analyzing it, not even trying to change it. Just what do I notice?
I love that.
Yeah, that is, I'm going to say that is the best metaphor. There's so much, like we talk about how important it is to practice when you're feeling good, when things are calm, when you're regulated. But that metaphor just brings it front and center. It's such an easy way to see the why. Like it doesn't, sometimes you get that information, like you said, you're like, okay, here's all these things, but how do I apply it? Even maybe you don't know how to apply it other than showing up race day and being like, okay. And so seeing that, it makes so much sense when you can break it down that way. You also talk about, and I'm hoping you'll get into it a little bit, how whatever you do, whatever you don't do intentionally, you're usually doing something else unintentionally, something that you don't want. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, our brains are meaning making machines, and they do these patterns. So when we do something enough, it kind of carves out this pattern in our brain. And if we are not intentionally choosing how we're going to do it, we are unintentionally going to slide down that rut, right? So I always tell people, when you're trying, like, another metaphor, when you're thinking about, like, being intentional, it often feels like you're, imagine your brain, you step up to a doorway every second of the day. You step up to this doorway and you open the door and there's 14 feet of snow. And you have this pathway that's like a bobsled luge that you could sit on your butt and just slide right down, right? Like emotional eating, I could sit on my butt and slide right down that bobsled luge, right? Dissociation, I can sit on my butt and slide right down that bobsled luge. Like, so if I don't step up to that doorway and get out a shovel and intentionally go down this new path, carving out this new path, I will unintentionally slide down that bobsled luge. So if I'm not intentionally saying, this is the way that I want to parent, right? I will unintentionally either repeat patterns that I witnessed, which I don't want to do, or it will unintentionally do the complete polar opposite of the patterns that I witnessed, which also don't work. I have to actively be choosing, how do I want to use this shovel, right? When I sit down to eat, if I am not intentionally choosing, and I'm not saying like, oh, I want to make sure that I'm eating this perfect meal. I'm saying, if I'm not intentionally sitting there saying, I'm going to enjoy this meal, whatever it is, whether it's something that my brain is saying, this is bad to eat, right? I want to intentionally sit there and eat it. If not, I will unintentionally emotionally eat, right? Like I will shovel it in and not enjoy it and not even pay attention to it, because for whatever reason, that is what right, that's the pattern that I carved out. So if I'm not intentionally choosing, and while I know in theory that can sound exhausting, I'm saying like pay attention all the time, I promise that it is no less exhausting than not doing it. So it's like, there's not, it's work either way.
Yeah, it's like choosing your heart, right? Like it's, do you want to be stuck in the anxiety and the stress of like emotional eating, right? I'm a big emotional eater. It's one of my earliest coping mechanisms. And so I constantly am in the negativity around, I'm either failing at it, or even if I'm succeeding at it for a week and let's say I'm eating right and doing well, it's still the stress and the chaos and the tension of how long can I hold on to this, or when is it going to slip up again, right? So you're right. I think it is a matter of like, it's hard no matter what, whichever way
Yeah.
I go.
Well, I guess the thing that always, because again, I worked in the fitness industry for a while, and when I thought that I was being intentional, right? I thought that I was being intentional because I was living and slowly dying by this plan, right? This is what I have written down for the workout. This is what I have, written down for my food. Well, I cannot intentionally eat a week in advance. I cannot intentionally move a week in advance. And if I wake up that day a week later, I saw it. If I wake up a week later and I say, but this was on my plan, but my body is not feeling like that, and I do what's on that plan because that's what I planned a week in advance, right? That's not intentionally moving.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's really clear. It's super simple. I love it.
I I need a little help with that because it is really clear and it makes so much sense. And I think about how every time I don't stick to a plan, then instead of feeling like I'm intentional, I categorize that as, oh, look, you failed, you failure, you can't keep up with things. You know, I turn it into a different perspective. How do we
A different
navigate?
Bob said luge of
Right,
shame and guilt
right.
and fuckery and
There you go again.
That is what we are taught, right? Like that is diet culture in its essence, right?
Just a quick pause to thank you for being here and listening to this episode of the podcast. We really appreciate it. Our goal with the podcast is to reach as many people as possible, and you can help with that. So whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the many other places podcasts are available, if you would hit subscribe, that would help us immensely. And if you're feeling extra supportive, you could leave us a 5-star review and share one of your favorite episodes, maybe this one. So again, thank you for listening. And now back to this episode.
I'm going to set up this plan that no one can actually follow through sustainably. And then when it doesn't work, they feel like they're the failure. It's their fault, not mine. It wasn't me. We have been so consistently trained away from listening to ourselves that it has become normalized.
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because we are constantly in the space of trying to do exactly that, trying to go internal and get out of the head and get into like this little sweet, tiny, safe space inside of the body where intuition is the thing, where it's very clear. Like when I'm super clear and not activated and not emotionally eating or raging or frustrated or whatever the case may be, right? I can just go quiet and the answer is immediate. Like it's instantaneous. It's not even like a maybe this, maybe that. No, it's like do that. Don't do that. Cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's a hard, like there's a part of me when I'm in that space where I know that it's that, I mean, for me, it's a spiritual aspect to it too, right? There's the component of that is the thing that is connected to the greater thing. And when I can get really quiet, I just have the wisdom that exists there. And I think that it's also a layer of just the animalistic instinctual aspect of me as not as a human, but as an animal existing on this planet too, right? So how do we help more people first and foremost? Because this is what I think. I'm always trying to unwrap the idea of like, how do you get people to first not experience that, but have awareness that that's what they're experiencing? Because I think we can all recount situations. It's like the thing where you walk into the room and you sense that something's off, or you get the butterflies in your belly over, some decision or something like that, right? How do we get people to have awareness that that's what's taking place? And then that's actually a thing that you can just use all the time.
We come back to those tipping points, right? The more that you, in those very subtle ways, connect to yourself without intentionally trying to do something with it, the more supported you are in doing that. So it's kind of like a paradox. It's like when you stop trying to do it and you focus on these things, you will inherently do it. And a big part is we have to unlearn. And when we can start to, again, when we say, I want to intentionally do this thing, we have to be like, well, why have I been doing it this way? Like you said, emotional eating, because I never saw adults handle anything other than through food and alcohol. A hard day, like what'd you do? Any tough emotions, right? Like that those were the coping skills that I witnessed. And not only that, again, we were domesticated. So it's like in that process of being domesticated, you are specifically told not to do things that are instinctive and to not listen to yourself. So I saw, this was years ago. My son's about to be 9, and he was maybe 3, and we were at the playground, and there's this big rock wall that goes up to the playground equipment. And he was doing it, and a little girl came over around the same age as him, and she started to climb it, and her caregiver came and pulled her off of the rock wall and said, no, you can't do it. And she said, yes, I can. And she went to climb it again, and the caregiver pulled her off and said, no, you can't, you'll get hurt. And I thought she walked away, and I thought that is how early it starts. in her mind, she thought, well, I thought I could do it. But this person who I trust and depend on says, I will get hurt. So I can't trust what my body was saying I could or could not do. And that drove home even more, teaching my son. So, a year later, he's like crawling on top of the slide, not using it, quote unquote, appropriately. And I someone had said something like, oh, you're not supposed to, you're going to get hurt, something like that. And he turned around and said, my mom said to trust my body. I was like, get him, kid, but I didn't have that either. I like most people, I was taught through fear, and I was raised in the Catholic Church. So I was taught through shame and fear. So it's like everything was, you're going to get hurt. That'll hurt you. You can't do that. You can't. This messaging over and over that you cannot trust your body, that you cannot trust yourself. And then when we have these very real, very primal instincts of, when I get mad, I want to stomp my feet. And when I get mad, I want to like scream. And, when I'm sad, I want to cry. And then we are told not to do that. Don't do that. Sit still. Go to your room and figure it out. Quit crying. Just chopping away at all of these things that make up who we are. All of these things that our bodies are just overflowing, trying to get it out so that we can do these things that they're asking us to do, so that we can move on with our day. But they're being suppressed over and over and over again. So we're suppressing these very natural instincts, and we're suppressing these things that we should be trusting in ourselves. What do we think is going to happen? So that's it. It has to be like, oh, of course. Like, of course, there's this child in me that says you can't listen to yourself. You can't trust yourself.
I still struggle with emotions like out loud, or emotions in public, emotions that are visible. There's so much of like, I'm reeling off of what you say. I love how you break it down. You break it down to where even if you've had like awareness and you've been working at this, there's a point like, oh, I get that. I didn't see it that way. And then things that you haven't even thought to look at, you break it down in a way that's like, that makes sense. And I can do something with that now. Or even if it's just an understanding of yourself that is so helpful. You spoke about the stomping your feet or yelling if you're mad, for instance. Anger is an emotion that I'm not alone in, that is hard for me. I feel it and I feel a lot of it, but I do not like to express it. It's very scary. And every time I do express it, I feel guilt, I feel shame, I feel fear. I feel like, okay, now I've terrified everybody, because I only saw toxic anger and unhealthy anger. And so one of the ways that I was working on how to do this was to move your body with the anger. I had somebody recommend boxing. And so there was a little while you hung a heavy bag for me, but it's good. It's good. I'm definitely like, that is a great tool to use. For me, it was, okay, I'm going to go be anger, which took me out of anger and put me into fear, because trying to get ready to go out there and then to start being angry, I was like in fear, and it was so hard to get there. It was so hard to get there. And there's just like different things that I've come up with. You mentioned one recently on one of your reels that I tried this morning, and it surprised me. It surprised me so much. You talk about the macro movement, the moving the body, the big, but the micro muscle movement does the same. And I'm going to have you explain it, but I experienced it and I tried it thinking, oh, is that really? And then was like, oh my gosh, it's so good. So will you talk about the micro movements and how you can express?
Yeah, I love that you're like, it worked. I still do that. Like, I'll still do stuff and I'll be like, oh, like, holy shit, it worked. Like, I've learned it, I studied it, I tell and teach people. And then like, I'm still like, and I feel like in the beginning when it really started to work for me, I was like, I felt like Sally Fields at the end of Mrs. Doubtfire. Like the whole time, I could have done that the whole time. Like there, it's like I've like just killing myself, like driving myself insane. And like, I could have just done this. So I get it. So we have these, again, very real, very natural, very primal instincts. And when the nervous system says, I'm feeling this thing, it needs to do that thing. In a big way, no. It can happen in a very small way. Like we can trust what's coming up, right? So we have these, it's a survival response. And again, it does not matter that it has been worse. It does not matter that other people have had it worse. It does not matter. And none of those things matter because the nervous system has no context. The nervous system does not have context to say, but there are people being bombed. Absolutely 100% true. However, the nervous system does not have that context. The only language that it knows is, am I safe or am I unsafe? And if the answer comes up no, it doesn't matter what's happening anywhere else. So the survival response comes up. And if we don't complete it, if we don't complete the survival response, if we say, sit still because you're going to look weird if you do the thing that you want to do, right? We don't complete the survival response. So we have decades of incomplete survival responses just hanging out, stored in that right hip, in between the shoulder blades or in your jaw. So when the survival response comes up, right, there is a micromuscular movement. So something is happening in the body. You absolutely will feel something, right? Maybe it is that jaw clenching. Maybe it's the back tensing up. Maybe you start bracing yourself. Well, if you start to let yourself like, oh, what is it? It feels like punching. I don't have to throw big punches. Nobody even needs to know what I'm doing. I feel that tension and I can just let it shake, right? Like I'm throwing punches right now, just letting it shake. And it will run its course. Like the physical part of it will run its course in about 90 seconds. So once you start with, I always say, observe, and this is a DBT skill, observe, describe, participate. So I observe, there's the tension. I'm going to describe, like I felt my entire back brace itself, like I was bracing for impact. And then I'm going to participate in that. Maybe I need to squeeze. Maybe I need to lean back and brace it on something. And in about 90 seconds of doing that, that survival response has been completed. And then I can be like, okay. I'm not saying the emotions are going to be gone. I'm not saying that anger will be gone. I'm saying that the anger will not be dragging you around, pulling you like a little puppeteer.
I love the completing the cycle of it because that makes so much sense. I mean, so many times I'm putting together the pieces. We have a dog. She's a little over a year old, right? And I was watching her the other day where her anxiety, and I'm projecting onto her that she had anxiety, but I could watch her energy levels, right? And she was getting very rambunctious and not aggressive, but just super hyped up. And she was getting pissed off at us and she was doing all these things that little puppies do. And then I watched her because like we were trying to get her to do something. And then she walked away from us. And I literally, like, I just watched her kind of like shake it off. I watched her from like her head to her toe or the top, like her nose to her tail. She just went through and like shook everything off. And it was like she took a deep breath and then she just went and lay down on the couch and chilled. And it was like suddenly I had awareness because you see it all the time, right? You see like the gazelle that runs from the lion and then gets up and shakes off and moves on with its day. And I'm like, how beautiful would it be to just be able to go, like you said, right? I've got tightness in my shoulders or my back or wherever it's at, articulate it and then just allow it to be felt and then just be like, whew, okay, completing that cycle. I love that.
If we don't interfere, children will do that. And specifically, if you witness someone who has autism and the way that they process and metabolize something that they're experiencing, there is no thinking about what does this look like to everyone else, right? It's like I am allowing this to complete them, and it's so beautiful to watch. Like if I don't stop my son from doing, I don't try to make anything stop. If he is crying, I never try to make it better. I say, oh my gosh, you're so sad. That must have really hurt, or that really hurt your feelings. I just start describing, right? I just start describing what's happening. And he's like, yeah. And I cannot begin to tell you how much quicker he moves through that than if I say, you're okay. Oh, don't feel that way. Oh, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I'm not going to invalidate his experience, right? I know exactly what that feels like and exactly how that turns out. And witnessing how much quicker he's able to move through it reiterates, oh, if I do this, I will move through it much quicker than if I try to change it or make it something else.
Yeah. Like Steph said earlier, Melissa, you break it down really well. I love it. I want to get into a topic because my guess is you're going to agree, but at the same time, and it's okay if you don't, right? That's no pressure. It's like, you better agree with this. No, it's the concept and idea behind how much of our pain and trauma we're storing into our bodies and what that's actually doing to our physical bodies. And so there's like the body keeps this score. It's been talked about a lot. It's been written about a lot, but I've been seeing it pop up more and more where it's like people are really starting to draw correlation and connection to the repressed emotions that we are all programmed to repress, right? The things that we've been talking about, all of these things over life. What have you seen, maybe have you experienced with the outcome of that in your own body as well as with the people that you work with?
Well, here's what I can tell you. I think I would have been maybe 19 years old. I, had all of these, like I said, I went to specialists for my back and I had all of these tests done. And of course it was degenerative disc disease. And I have this syrinx, that's like a fatty tumor inside my spinal cord, and 3 bulging discs. So I was in a lot of pain and
This was
in
at
my
this was
19
at
years old,
19.
19 years old. So in my sacroiliac joint dysfunction, so like the joints basically where my spine sits into my hips, and all of these things that they offered, I could have done the surgeries and gone on disability. That was at 19 years old. I'm 39 years old, and I live completely, relatively pain-free. Like I don't ever experience pain like I did at 19, 20, until I was 22 years old. That's kind of when I started to really like get into some of this. But I would still have like bouts of a lot of pain. But now, and again, if you did an MRI, you're going to see the exact same things that you saw then. I had no surgeries. You will still see, it will look the exact same, but I do not live in pain or move through pain. So there was something else in there, right? Like,
I have an opinion on what that is, right? But I want to know what you think it is. I want to understand from the perspective of, because having something like that and then 20 years later recognizing, oh, I don't experience life that way anymore. And medicine, doctors, everybody's telling me that it's this one specific thing. I think that's so common for us.
Yeah.
As humans, right? As people here in Western culture. We just wanted to push pause real quick on the podcast and invite you to come over and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We want to reach over 1 million people with this podcast, and we're going to need your help to do it. Head over to YouTube, search out Steph Craig, and hit that subscribe button. You'll find all the episodes of the podcast there, as well as some clips from each episode. If you're feeling extra generous, which we hope that you are, do us a favor and share an episode with somebody. Maybe even this episode that you're listening to now. We believe that healing is possible and that we all do better when we do it together. Thank you for the support. Now let's get back to the show.
It's always wild how once I started learning more about it, and my sacrum is where a lot of the pain was, and in my world, like we call that the sacred bone, and the SI joints, which is where all of my pain would be. That's where I would be in a lot of pain, and like sometimes completely immobile. Like I would lose like the ability to bend forward and side to side, and they are the shock absorbers of the body. And when I look at my life. And like when I look at a small child, like this small child that constantly felt like that, and the breath would be stuck. And it's like I functioned from a place where I one day went, and then I just lived there. And my parents did the best that they could, and they were really young, and they had their own traumas and their own histories. And when I look at how many times I was like, there were no clear cut boundaries. It was landmines. Like I never knew what I would step on. So I, again, lived in that space, like ready constantly to absorb the shock. And it's like, oh, this little girl, like I picture her all the time. And that's a huge component of this work too. Like I picture her all the time, and I'm like, it's not there anymore. I've got you now. I'm the parent now. I will never leave you. You're always with me.
I'm just going to have to sit here and boob for a minute because you said shock absorbers, and it was like, oh, whoa. It's not even, it's just like that. It's okay. Like that's just like the first awareness. I've never heard it described that way. And it clicks so much of pain that I have. Like I had a back injury at 19, herniated disc, all this comes up. You feel our kids, like it didn't start with you. Our daughter, she also at that age started having all of these and it's just, I don't even think I'm speaking like where you can understand me right now. I think my brain is going a little too fast. But hearing that like shock absorber, we have this new thing that we've been hearing that makes it's not to blame or shame, it's to explain. Mm-hmm. And just that little bit of understanding feels like it creates space for possibility, create space for liberation. And I would, if you have a moment, could you talk a little bit more about how did you work with that? Because that's significant. Like you said, the MRIs are going to show the same thing, and you've had that awareness. What are some of the things that you've done with that space? What have you done?
One thing that I realized, I did a lot of thinking on, because I kind of sustained where I was from like 20, probably around then, like 19 until maybe like 28. I again, I was a get by girl. Like I could do just enough that I can like get by and function. And I remember wondering like, how did I survive that? Because like, how did I make it work? Like, how did I get by? And I was like, oh my gosh, the one thing, like I did not treat myself well by any respect, but one thing that I did regularly and consistently was dance. I was in quite a few booty shaking contests in my day. And when that clicked in my brain, like, okay, so because I'm like, there was something. I also used to listen to really loud music. Like I had subwoofers in my car when I was 19. So like that rattling,
that vibration,
vibration. So when I was like, okay, I'm going to use what I already have been using. What I already know worked. But imagine if I wasn't at a bar drinking doing it. Or listening to like shoot you in the chest music. And like, imagine if I were doing it intentionally, right? Like, I still love gangster rap. I don't care. But but if I would intentionally use that. So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to dance in my kitchen every day. Right. I'm going to hum and create that vibration at really like high level ways of doing it. And I think if we do more of that and less of like, tell me how to do it. Like, tell me what's the way? Don't show me exactly how to move. I keep seeing all of these like somatic yoga and I'm like, yoga has never not been somatic. like Yeah, there's no,
Somatic
you did
yoga.
not create something new. Like, there's no,
No, here we are. We're going to do yoga, but this time we're going to get into our bodies.
yeah, I'm like, okay. Like, try the somatic yoga and, really like release the trauma from your hips. And it's like,
Oh my
you
goodness.
know, but it is a matter of saying like, what have I always done? Now, how can I do this in like a high level way? Right. So like, what was I instinctively drawn towards? So me, it was like dancing and music, that vibration of my body and that movement of my body. And no one needs to tell you how to do it. In fact, I think the more that, because we're coming into this space where it's like everybody's starting to learn it and then it's going to turn into something else. And the more that somebody else says, here is the how, here's specifically how to move your body, what's going to happen? If we're listening to how somebody else is saying, here's how to specifically, we're going to go back to the same place. And I host retreats, and at the end of every retreat, I always have postcards from whatever place we are in, and people write themselves a postcard and then they give it to me. And at some time, it could be, weeks or months or years from them, I I have cold chills right now. I will mail it out when it comes. In 2017, I did a retreat in Hawaii with one of my good friends, and she lives there. So I did this practice, but I did one and I handed it to her. And about a year later, I get this postcard for myself, and all it said on it was, "You already are."
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I'm getting emotional even thinking about it. It's like, oh my gosh, just that reminder of like, I already have every single thing that I need. I already know exactly what to do. My work is to listen. Like, my work is to listen. Just listen. It's like we talk about this mind-body connection and we're like, how do I get it? I'm like, sis, it's always been there. Like they don't function separately. That's just how you've been looking at them, right? Like, you don't listen to them together. But it is like, you already are. And I mean that for both of you. I mean that for every single person hearing this. You already are. You already know. You already do. You already can.
You know what this makes me think of? I'm going to share this with you because it just, so many times I'll have like these, I put a piece together for myself and I want to share it with you. The way that you were describing it, like having awareness of like, what was I doing back during that time period in my 20s that was unconsciously helping me, right? And then putting some of those pieces together. There's this, and I say idea or concept. It's not, somebody didn't create this, right? It's kind of the laughable thing of like, oh yeah, do somatic yoga. The whole thing of like, when we're existing with and in nature, we get a bug bite. The remedy for the bug bite is the plant that we're standing right next to. Like whatever, we need is already around us. And so the idea that I've got issues with my body or injuries or pains and I'm always looking to see like, what do I need to go towards or what do I need to fix this problem? In all likelihood, it's probably already within my space and already in my existence. I'm already either doing something or aware of something, or all I have to do is just kind of go from tunnel vision to opening up and seeing like, oh, there's the solution. Because you bring up like dancing and vibration and music, and I'm like, okay, that makes a ton of sense, right? So it's just having awareness of like, it's already there. Yes, you already are. And the remedy, the solution is already within your sphere. You don't have to really go for, the magic somewhere else. It's already existing in your space. I like that thought.
Yeah. It's your body is already saying, this is what I need to do. We've just been trained to not listen. Like, that looks weird, or that looks, I was at a playground I go to parks a lot, obviously, with my son, but there a couple years ago, I was there with a friend and her kids, and there was just a lot going on. And she likes to talk. I was overstimulated. Like, so much stuff was happening, and I could feel it. And this is one of those moments. Again, this is like these are tipping point moments. I was feeling overstimulated. And I'm like, okay, you have a choice here. You can sit and just keep sitting in it, or you can do something. So I got up and I kicked off my shoes and I started bouncing and shaking in the grass. So I'm barefoot in the grass, bouncing and shaking. And she said, you look like a crazy person. And I said, for the first time in my life, I don't feel like it. And in that moment, I was like, if my choice, if my options are to look like I have it together on the outside and feel horrible on the inside, or look like a crazy person on the outside and feel wonderful on the inside, I'm going to choose that one every fucking time.
I love it.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I feel
Adopting
crazy a
that.
lot.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like he's like there, when other people, I used to, I'm still working on where I struggle with it is when I'm doing it parenting, like, cause I can still feel myself becoming really hyper aware of how I'm being perceived. Like I have an easier time when it's just me. Like, I'm like, I'm aware of how I'm being perceived and I'm like, don't care. For some reason, when I'm parenting, I'm like, it still kicks in. So I'm like, you have to be that person that's like, we're going to stomp our feet right now. All right. Is that helping? But it's the truth. I'm like, I lived in this way. Like, I don't, it's not that I don't care, because I think that's kind of impossible. Like, I care and I'm aware of what it looks like to other people, but it's like, again, I have to choose intentionally how I feel on the inside over everything else.
I want to ask you too. It's coming. Hold on. The question is there. We had awareness in the not too distant past that so many times we're stretching far outside of our comfort zone. And so the question is, right now in your life, where are you pushing up against that edge of your comfort zone? And what does it feel like? And what are you doing? Like, what is challenging you right now that you find is making you butt up against that spot where, okay, here's my new growth, but it's uncomfortable and it's hard, but I'm choosing to step into it. What does that look like for you?
This every day when I post a video, I have my personal life is not neat or tidy. I'm a single mom and I parallel parent at best. And there's still a lot behind my scenes. And I have friends all the time that are like, if people that were following me, they're like, if they only knew, like, oh my gosh, they would be, I don't want to say like they would be impressed. That's what she says, but it's like, so many things, the first time, I think it's been probably 2 years, the first time that a video had over 100,000 views, I wanted to delete the app. I wanted to delete TikTok because the person that was driving my ship at the time kicked in this teenager that was like, they're going to come after you. They're going to tell you, you're not shit. You don't know anything. Like, people are going to want to tear you down. So just delete it, go hide under the covers. So every day that I get on there and keep talking, like every day that I get on here and keep talking, I am butting up against that discomfort. Every day that I am open about my stories, and every day that I am in it all the time. And I witnessed my son go through a lot of things that I went through as a child. And sometimes I always say that it feels like it amplifies the pain, like the things that I'm trying to heal to then witness, like still at 39 years old, trying to heal, to then witness in front of me to this person that I want to protect. It is like, it can be gutting. And that is why self-regulation was the thing that, like, this makes so much sense, because I drove myself mad trying to make everything around me okay. Well, when then, right? When this happens, then I'll be okay. When I can figure this out, then I'll be okay. When I can mend this relationship, then I'll be okay. When I can get my parents to see it, then I'll be okay. It was the same feeling of like, how do I make it stop? How do I make it stop? How do I make it stop? So in my personal life, how I do it is I come into it and say, this is the ingredients. Like, all of it are the ingredients for self-regulation. All of it are the ingredients for healing. All of it, with my son, I'm like, I prayed to raise this resilient, kind, compassionate adult. And I've never met any of those that didn't have lots of fertilizer. So I'm like, these are the ingredients, right? Like I tell myself, like, it's alchemy. How do I take this shit and turn it into fertilizer? And these are all opportunities to practice self-regulation. So it's like, I can't there's no end of the road with it. There's no place to come to.
One of my favorite spiritual teachers is Ram Dass, and he refers to it as just grist for the mill. It's all just continual, like, let me work, let me work, let me work, let me work, because it's all leading to this, yes, eventually, obviously, spiritual enlightenment to a certain extent, but it's healing. It's all how we're reflecting. It's all how we're healing. It's all how you're like getting into the muck of it and turning it into, like you said, the fertilizer to grow from, to expand from. What is a place where, so if showing up and like being yourself on camera and sharing your journey and your experience and everything like that is really at the edge of what is comfortable for you, is there something that you would be like really excited to share? Like, is there something that you really want to start sharing and talking about or expressing, or a side of yourself that you want to start showing that maybe you're really afraid to, but you're really excited to? Is there anything like that?
I think I'm getting more and more into it, and I've started. You guys have seen my content. It is very personal. Like, it's not, and that's what I always tell people. It's like, I'm not sharing this from. Yes, I know it and do it professionally, but this is a very personal experience to me. I think maybe being more as open as I possibly could with things that happen in my personal life and how I navigate those waters, definitely is like a little bit over that edge. And I've dabbled a little bit, and I'm like, I definitely a podcast, more long form content, and writing a book for certain. And now I said it out loud and it's recorded. Uh, of that merge those worlds. Like, this is my very real, relatable experience that I know a lot of people, maybe not in the same way, but certainly, like, even the way that we connected in like a very physical, like, this is what happened to me and this is what it felt like in my body, and like sharing that and merged with like, here's what I did, here's the how to, like, here's a how to, I think would be it for sure.
That's beautiful. I think that's one of the benefits of, because we're always trying to figure out, because we have like the love-hate relationship with social media. It's hard to be on there actively participating in the machine of what it is on one level. And then it's like on another level, there's such beautiful interactions with people. And we're constantly doing everything that we can. So our big goal is always to just continually hold up a mirror the best that we possibly can for people to see themselves in. And the more that we're willing to show, like the more that we're willing to present in that mirror, as far as like what our lived experience is individually, as well as like what it's like to really try to navigate relationship together, as well as healing together, the more we can show all of that, then the more people get to see themselves reflected in it. And I think that's one of the like really beautiful things that social media has brought the world, is it's this wonderful mirror for everybody to see themselves reflected in, right? But nobody knows that, or it's like such a like that's how it should have been presented, not, hey, let's share stupid photos of cats and things like that with each other. It's like, no, here's an opportunity for us to connect with the world in such a massively huge way, to where we can see each other in ourselves and in our lives and in the experiences that we're all going through together. So I think you need to do it. Like, the encouragement is there, right? Show more of your lived experience of what it's truly like, because at least for us, that's where we have really found it's interesting, because it's not just, I mean, quote unquote, like success or growth or expansion as far as like the professional aspect of it, but it's truly also it, because it's the twofold thing, right? It's the binary where the more we can show up and share with the world. We were just talking about this the other day, where it's like the harder we work at healing, the deeper we go, the more shadow that we unpack, the better our fucking life gets. Like, the proof is in the pudding at this point with the level of work that we've done. The more we work, the easier life gets. It's like that thing we were talking about earlier, right? Choose your heart. Do you want a miserable, chaotic, stressful life where your body's falling apart, your relationships are shit, you hate your job, you're overweight, you're drinking too much? All of these things take a lot of work. And the opposite side of it is like, well, start unpacking it, start going towards it. And like, without a doubt, we can say for certain, at least for us, that it gets easier and it gets better.
You get better at it.
Right.
Like, you're definitely, and you know, to what you said about social media, it's like the connection. I was on social media for years, like, but until like TikTok and Reels, and I could get on there. The curated, we've moved away from like the perfectly curated. I didn't do that well. Like, I could never do that well. But once we shifted to like, just get on there and talk. Okay. You know, I'm perfectly curated photos and perfectly got like, I'm not, I don't do it well. But if you say like, hey, get on here and talk like you would talk to people every day. And that's why people are like, what's your content calendar? I'm like, huh?
Right.
What? I will do a series because I started talking, and then I'm like, oh, well, running out of time. Part 1. Like, I don't know how many. We'll see how it goes. Like, just that, like, even coming on here and talking to you guys, just like a natural flow of conversation. I think that that's where the magic is, that connection.
This has been amazing. I don't want to end this conversation. I feel like we could just sit here and keep talking.
Yeah, you'll
for
have to come
hours.
back, Melissa.
Yeah.
You'll have to come back.
Absolutely.
Over and over again. Like, there is an open invitation for you now, when you have new things coming up, you want to come on, like, let us know. Like, we would love to have you on again. Your content has resonated with me so much. And now, after getting the opportunity to connect with you on this, like, I adore you. Like, everybody go follow. You say you do retreats too. Like, so tell us what you have going on, where we can find you, where we can get more of you and connect with ourselves.
I took a break from retreats for 2024, but they will be back in 2025.
Okay.
So if you join, you know, my mailing list, like, you'll be the first to hear about, you know, when they launch, and when they're back and where they'll be and all of that. I have the Reclaiming Healthy initiative, and I created this community and course to, you know, those hows, like, what are the tipping points? What are the tools and skills that I need? So it's kind of like, how do I conceptually start to look at this? And then how do I actually apply this? So it's broken down. Yeah, I had it for a long time, but it kind of got, I just kept adding to it to the point that people are like, oh my gosh, there's too much stuff in here. So I broke it down in tangible bite-sized pieces. And that Reclaiming Healthy initiative is available now. The pre-sale just ended, but it's available. It's live. And then I also, Reclaiming You, I work one-on-one with people. So then there is that option as well. And I can work with people all over the world, which I have just absolutely adored doing, getting to know people from all over. You know, I'm on the East Coast and in the US, and I've worked with people in Australia and Paris and the UK. And it's so beautiful to meet so many different people and have our shared experiences. And one thing that I really value is like, I am not the authority here. I am a mirror and a sounding board, and I can give you some guidance, but what I'm doing is guiding you back to you. So everything that I do is not like, hey, let's learn more about Melissa. I'm like, no, here, let's to bring everything back to you. You are the authority. You are the chef. I am the sous chef. Here are the tools that you need.
Love that. Okay. So is it reclaiminghealthy.com? Is that
reclaiminghealthy.com, and all of my socials are reclaiming Melissa.
Melissa? Okay. Follow her everywhere. Go get on the mailing list so you can be the first to know about these retreats coming up in 2025. And you do not have to wait. You can start working with her one-on-one now, and you can join her initiative now. It is open, as she says. So like right after you're done with this video, like go to it now. Join, start reconnecting with yourselves, really diving in. You have all the ingredients. Like she said, you are the chef. Now's the opportunity, and you can do it. You already are. To use your words in your postcard, you already are. Thank you.
Melissa, we have a tagline for every episode that we end every episode with. And so it's expect the best and plan for the greatest. Do you want to end the episode for us?
Expect the best, or what is it? expect the best.
Plan for the greatest.
Ooh, expect the best, plan for the greatest.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Wait and see, you and me, we were meant to be.
We want to make something perfectly clear. This podcast is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as a substitute for professional advice. We're sharing with you our own personal experiences and insights, things we have found to be helpful on our healing journey. But we are not licensed therapists. If you need help, it's important to seek out a qualified professional. Remember, we believe that we all do better when we heal together. See you soon.